Good morning, everyone. We begin with a call to worship, words adapted from a poem by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. So many gods, so many creeds, so many paths that wind and wind, but just the act of being kind is all a hurting world really needs. I now invite you to turn to someone near you and share quietly an act of kindness that you have received or experienced recently. So perhaps something that you have done for another person or something kind that they have done for you. And listen out for a little bit of music from Nick to signal the time for sharing has finished. And if I have to, I will resort to the hand. So, a little bit of quiet sharing now of acts of kindness, please. Thank you, everyone. I will light our chalice flame, the symbol of our free and questioning faith. May a flame of compassion ignite in our hearts, inspire our minds, and call us to action. Our service today is about making space, and we'll be considering different ways that we can provide spaces for everyone's voices to be heard. I'm glad to see the tissues on the chalice table. I feel like sometimes mine is a ministry of tissues. I've always got some in my bag. And you may notice if you turn to your neighbour that you have a slightly different coloured paper of your service sheet. Some of you are lucky enough to have parchment paper, and it was all an accident. I asked someone else to print the service sheets for me, and she didn't have access to the stationery cupboard, and so she had to make do with whatever paper she could find. Only God is perfect. Now, do you know the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and the wolf, the big bad wolf, who dressed up like her granny. And Little Red Riding Hood spotted something was wrong, because her granny didn't have such big and sharp teeth. Now, wolves can be scary and dangerous, which is why we have stories like that to warn us about them. But I'd like to share a true story about wolves that I learned in a book called The Secret Network of Nature by Peter Wollomben, who also wrote The Hidden Life of Trees. Peter Wollomben. Now, there's a park in America you may have heard of called Yellowstone. It was the first nature park in America. A huge area was protected. But back in the 19th century, farmers started to hunt any wolves that ventured out of the park because they were eating their cattle. And by the 1930s, there were no wolves left in the area. This was good for the farmers and good for the cattle, but not so good for the countryside. Giant deer, called elk, which would normally be eaten by the wolves, had nobody chasing after them, except perhaps a few hunters. So their families grew and grew and grew. And they ate and ate and ate. They loved the little saplings, the young trees by the river. And because they ate them all up, there was nothing to stop the soil from being washed away. And because there were no saplings, the beavers didn't have anything to eat or to use to build their homes. So there were fewer and fewer beavers living on the riverbank. In 1995, the park rangers brought wolves back into the park, and a waterfall of wonderful things started to happen. The wolves ate the elk. The trees started to grow, especially those along the riverbanks. Within a few years, the beavers had returned, building dams which made little pools. Lots of little amphibians who liked to live in the water came back. And that meant that lots of different types of birds came back because they had plenty to eat. It all started with a wolf. Not so evil, not the big bad wolf of our imaginations. After all, just a hungry wolf. It all started with a wolf, and life got back to normal again. And so, as we say goodbye to our children, we will prepare ourselves for our first hymn. And Nick's going to play all of our hymns through once, the whole tune, so we can get used to it before we rise and sing. The words are in your service sheet, Here We Have Gathered. So let's listen to the introduction and then rise to sing, Here We Have Gathered. let us gather for a time of prayer and meditation. We begin with a short prayer, and then I will make space for a different form of communing with the divine, as I invite Danny to lead us in a chant that some of us learnt yesterday evening. Let us pray. Spirit of life and love, God of our hearts, help us to widen the circle of connection so that all voices are uplifted, all hopeful dreams are encouraged, even the silly ones. All creatures may flourish and feel fulfilled. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are one.
If we stand and perhaps hold hands if we could, just hold hands with your neighbours. I'll sing it through once and then we'll all sing it together 4 times. Is that okay? By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one. By breath, by blood, by body, by spirit, we are all one.
May the words we sing, our thoughts and our prayers reach those who need them most. Blessed be. Amen.
Amen.
And I now invite Charlotte Chanteloup to give our reading.
Thank you. This piece by Jane Blackhall is titled Make the Circle Wider, Creating Safer Spaces for All. She opens it with a line from the hymn, Break Not the Circle, which we will sing later in the service. Break not the circle, make it wider still, until it includes, embraces all the living. In early March 2020, as the spectre of COVID-19 began to loom large and terrible scenes of suffering were coming out of Italy, I decided to stay home and do my best to avoid infection. This was a couple of weeks before the government announced the first UK lockdown, and most people I knew were still more or less going about their business as usual, though anxiety was in the air. But as I live with my dad, who was already in his mid-80s, and we both had conditions that would put us at higher risk of complications if we caught the virus, our household locked down early. And we've continued to be more cautious than most ever since. We still don't go out much. In the midst of this global crisis, I felt an urge to do something, if only to keep myself occupied. Not much could assuage my runaway panic at that point, but I intuited that it might make me feel better if I had something constructive and community-minded on which to focus my attention. Just a few weeks earlier, I'd been at Fuse, the Festival of Unitarians in the Southeast, where we'd launched a new website to promote heart and soul circles. We'd already been running these small groups at Kensington for about 7 years, and they'd come out of a desire, my desire, for a contemplative, prayerful space where people could feel safe to share deeply about their lives, their real lives. A space where we could reflect on those things which mattered most to us and trust that others would listen with care without trying to fix, save, advise each other, without defaulting to old habits of conversational one-upmanship or domination or intellectual debate. In March 2020, with COVID looming, someone, Liz Slade in fact, Chief Officer of our General Assembly, Liz had been at Fuse and she casually asked me, could Heart and Soul work online? Within days, I'd put a shout out to friends on social media. Would anyone like to give it a go? And 12 people joined me for the first Heart and Soul gathering on Zoom. It did work online, perhaps even better than it had in person, because the need of those gathered was so great. For that first year at least, most of us had nowhere else to go. Nowhere we could gather in community like this, to process the fear, the distress, the upheaval, the uncertainty, the loss. To be honest about how we were doing, each week we would gather around a new theme. The themes were chosen to reflect the concerns of the moment, and I held thrice weekly gatherings of 12 or more. Without the pandemic, the kick up the arse it gave us to act, the desperate urge to find a safe space to connect, and a community of companions, when the outside world closed down to us. I don't know if we would ever have got round to creating this online sanctuary. But it soon became clear that these gatherings, their clear structure, their comfort of routine, and the safety it provides, the continuity of a core group of regulars showing up week in, week out, coupled with the ongoing openness to new arrivals, these online gatherings were enabling us to include many people who simply could not participate in our congregational gatherings otherwise. These gatherings were far more accessible for many people than church as we had known it had ever been pre-pandemic. They make the circle wider. I think of the people who were previously dedicated members of Unitarian congregations in the UK, but who moved overseas due to family concerns, or for work, or pushed to leave by Brexit. They found themselves living nowhere near a Unitarian church, but could now reconnect with the community they left behind. I think of the carers looking after elderly relatives, and the single parents unable to leave kids unattended, but able to make some time for themselves in a quiet corner to join us on their iPad or phone. And it's not always possible to find a quiet corner. I think of one parent who for some weeks now has joined Heart and Soul from a spot beside her child's hospital bed as medical monitors bleep in the background. I think of the people with disabilities and chronic illnesses, including a number with long COVID as the pandemic went on, who could not physically leave their home or hospital ward or bed, but could join our circle online and fully participate, just like everyone else. I think of people doing shift work or on 0-hour contracts who can't make a habit of showing up regularly on Sunday mornings, but can occasionally squeeze in an online gathering at a different time of day. I think of many, including me, who are neurodivergent and who find this safe, structured, carefully held space suits their needs in a way that our traditional gatherings and congregational norms might not. I have noticed that a remarkably high proportion of autistic and highly sensitive people attend these gatherings. All these people would always have found it hard, if not impossible, to turn up in person to church as we knew it, even before the pandemic came along and complicated matters. Our in-person churches are situated in a limited number of locations, often with relatively homogeneous congregations, self-selected by the fact that the traditional form of gathering works for them. Once the world started to open up again, some drifted away and went back to their local churches and their Sunday morning hymn sandwiches. But for many people, that is not and never was an option. These online Heart and Soul gatherings are so precious to those of us that remain. They're a lifeline. And I hope their example will serve as a reminder to think about who we might be inadvertently excluding from our communities by doing what we've always done.
As we prepare to sing our next hymn, which will be in your green hymn book, do make use of the tissues, if you wish, on the chalice table. The hymn is 220, and it is a hymn suggested by our dear Jane, who is joining us online with our other summer school participants. It may be an unfamiliar tune, Break Not the Circle, so please enjoy Nick's playing of the tune before you rise to sing hymn 220, Break Not the Circle. invite Louise to give her thoughts for today.
Good morning, everybody, and a special good morning to those of you joining us online. And Jane, of course, thank you for that wonderful reading. So, earlier in the week, I have introduced some ideas about our stories, how our stories shape our identity, and how we can try to look beyond the thin stories to the thick, rich stories of our lives. I have touched on the invisibility of certain groups, the misunderstood, the victimized, the vilified, and how important it is to be open to hearing all stories without prejudice. I spoke about Martin Buber on Sunday. One of his great legacies was the recognition of the central importance of truly authentic relationships between people. He writes, "When two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them." I'm just going to read that again. When two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. So in our genuine, open interactions with each other, we are truly creating the divine. Whatever your belief about the nature of the divine, this is powerful stuff. When we tell the truth of our lived experiences to someone who is really listening, Martin Buber calls this an I-thou encounter. An I-thou relationship is one in which both parties fully recognise and accept each other. For Buber, this I-thou relationship is the basis of human wholeness and a route to the divine. So today, I want to talk about the sacred, human, life-affirming work of ensuring that there are places, that there are times when we can all be our authentic selves and share the truth of our lived experience. It seems to me that we need three things: the physical or online space, the time, and the intention to provide a safe space for sharing the truth of our lives. We need to feel safe, that those we are sharing with will listen and not judge, will be open to our reality and not dismiss it. So we need to know those people that we share our life experiences with enough that we trust them with that which is precious and authentic. I still have a memory from my youth of a church minister passing on something that I had told him in confidence. It has stayed with me, although it was more than 35 years ago, and I am even now appalled by this breach of trust. If we want people to tell us how they really are, and we feel able to hear it, we need to signal to them somehow that we are open to an authentic encounter. When I work with volunteers helping to run activities for young asylum seekers, I advise them to try to cultivate a calm, accepting demeanour, so that a young person can feel confident to tell them something if they choose to. To feel that the volunteer is not going to overreact with exaggerated sympathy or be shocked or upset, that they can hear and hold whatever is spoken about. Thinking back to Steph from Queer Eye, who I told you about yesterday, a rainbow badge would be one way to give a positive signal to someone who is uncertain about whether they need to be invisible or not. Don't worry, I don't think for a moment that the problems of the world can be fixed by badges. However, if we meet someone new and we would like to make an authentic connection, it's well worth thinking about how we can, by our appearance and initial conversation, demonstrate this. And time. How often are we rushing about, busy with our own lives, hurrying to get somewhere and focused on what we need to do? In that state, we aren't available to listen and really be with another person. Lack of time and a task focus rather than an openness to the people we come across is completely understandable. A hectic schedule and preoccupation with my own stuff is probably the default mode of my existence. Actually, it feels reassuring to me. Being open to encounters with people, either strangers or friends, might lead to something unpredictable, something beautiful and authentic, but unpredictable. Hopefully, if we can be open to the uncertainty, the slightly scary uncertainty, then we can also reap unexpected benefits. I wrote unexpected blessings, which is much more poetic. Alternatively, we can seek out a space that is structured and controlled so that we can feel confident and safe to share, even though we don't know everyone very well. So these spaces may be AA meetings, heart and soul, support groups, either online or in person, or other groups such as creative writing or poetry. Some of those who belong to traditionally invisible groups are doing amazing work to make their lives visible and therefore increase awareness and understanding of others in their situation. Those of us who wish to step out of our own small worlds and learn more about the real life experiences of those quite different from ourselves have a wonderful opportunity to learn from all the material that's out there. But honestly sharing online in a public or semi-public space means that strangers or acquaintances can give truly horrible feedback, which can take away any sense of safety and feel personally diminished, and at extreme can take away actual physical safety as well. In fact, there are a lot of reasons why we might be carefully sharing only a part of our life experience, or even being a little bit misleading. The Instagram effect means that we see the lives of others online and think that they are looking amazing all the time and having amazing experiences and holidays. And so we feel the pressure to curate our online presence as well. Amongst my friends, online friends, I find that they just stop posting when they're going through difficult times. It's completely understandable, but it again gives the impression that everything that happens is positive. To be honest, I'm the same really. I tend to post when I'm happy, when I've got a nice picture to share, but when things are not going so well, I'm not sharing online, which is fine. It's my choice. I'm not saying people should do differently, but there are others who do post warts and all, whatever happens, and I do appreciate it when they do that, because I am reassured that I'm not the only one who struggles sometimes. The negative effects of sharing online, the rose-tinted Instagram effect, the hostile responses to public posts, and an awareness of all the awfulness that happens online might make us think that the only way that we can have a true I-thou relationship is in person, that relating online is somehow inferior and potentially dangerous. But we know that everything changed during the pandemic. Companies made working at home work for a large proportion of their employees during COVID lockdowns. This continues to a certain extent today, with the numbers working from home higher than before COVID. It must be enormously frustrating for those who were trying to persuade employers to accommodate their disabilities or caring responsibilities by allowing home working pre-pandemic. And of course, social meetups and church went online. We are uplifted by Jane's account of Heart and Soul, providing an opportunity for anyone who has online access to share in a time of connection. Many of you will have joined her or the others who offer Heart and Soul online. Heart and Soul is making space for anyone who has an internet connection, which makes it accessible to many more people than meeting in a building. Those who live far away, those with disabilities, mental health issues, caring responsibilities. we should ask ourselves, how are the groups or events that we are involved in excluding people who might be interested? Is the space that we are making really open to all? Is there anything we can do to open it up? Are there any barriers that we can take down? There is a conflict here. I think we need to be open about it. Any one community only has a limited capacity to run groups and worship services and so on. While some may be able to access online, some may be unable to join online, and some of us may prefer to meet in person. In a democratic organisation, where do we put our resources? There was a huge amount of creativity in solving these logistical issues during the pandemic, and the advantage of online events is that the participants don't need to be local. So, for example, churches can pool resources. But when circumstances allow and the majority prefers in person, do we exclude those who can't attend? Hybrid, in-person events which are also online, is one solution to this, which many churches and chapels have embraced. But also, perhaps we need to acknowledge that there isn't always a solution that will suit everyone. But if we approach our planning with the intention of making our events accessible, then we can at least get the issues out in the open and make tough decisions if we need to. On both an organisational and personal level, it is so easy to exclude people. My youngest son is an Afghan Muslim and doesn't like to be around people drinking alcohol, which excludes him from many opportunities to socialise. Some neurodivergent people find noisy spaces difficult. From my own experience, and to my shame, I had not even noticed the noise levels in a particular meeting place until it was pointed out to me. On the other hand, meaningful encounters are often unplanned, serendipitous. Over the past 5 years, I have been shopping at the only halal shop in Guildford. They do sell halal in Tesco's, but it's not such a good range. And I would count the owner as a person that I definitely have I-thou moments with. He has a son the same age as my youngest, and although I don't actually know his name, I have shared parts of my life with him and his employees. During the pandemic, they were the people outside my immediate family that I saw the most. I went to Waitrose as well, but they changed the cashiers over, so it wasn't always the same people. We're laughing, but our lives became so small during that time that those tiny interactions were so important. No, and it is funny too. I value that connection with nameless halal shop guy, and my life would be poorer if I were to stop seeing them regularly. That is a connection I would never have predicted in my life. So, an I-thou connection, a sharing of our truth, can be really brief and in a public space. Maybe you can recall impromptu, spontaneous encounters, not accountants. Let's start that sentence again, shall we? Maybe you can recall impromptu, spontaneous encounters with strangers that are so precious. Not just at halal shops, but at supermarkets, coffee shops, bus stops, on trains, in multi-storey car parks. I recently met a lovely couple of women on a Sunday morning trying to get into a multi-storey car park in Leeds. As we worked out how to get in and pay for parking, it really wasn't straightforward. We chatted about what we had done the night before, with real concern for me, a person they had only met a minute before. They checked, "You're not still drunk, are you?" I wasn't. Do you remember New Orleans Steph from yesterday? I think it was Karamo, one of the Fab Five, who told her, surround yourself with people who make you feel loved and comfortable. The Fab Five invited her to a gay bar and they all brought along their partners to hang out. You could see how relaxed and free she felt, just able to be herself. Sometimes we need to be with people like us, people who understand our life experience. When I started fostering, I had the idea that myself, my family, and our friends would be enough community for our first boy, a Kurd. However, when I first took him to college and he met other Kurdish boys, he was a changed young man. He became animated, confident, at ease. He had found the community where he could be himself, speak in his own language, and not have to explain himself. From then on, he thrived, and I learned a useful lesson that, however nice it is to spend time with a variety of people, there are huge benefits to being with your own community if you can, however you define that. So far, I have only touched on human interactions, but now I want to make some space for the divine. I know that in this room there are approximately 40 people, all with their own unique experience and concept of God, Goddess, Spirit, the universe. I invite you to use whichever name helps you to connect with that which is sacred, if the words that I use are not speaking to you. No matter what our conception of God, he, she, they, it should be a safe haven for us to be our own true selves, unconditionally accepted. When we are with the divine, we can speak about our true experiences, be our authentic selves, and know that we are loved. Martin Buber said, when two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. But when we are alone, the divine does not desert us. Connecting with the divine in an authentic and vulnerable way is a space for us to share the truth of our lives with that which is beyond understanding. And being truly ourselves in that space can be a source of peace and healing. Shall we just take a couple of moments just to be with the sacred, the divine, Goddess, however you would like to express that. I wish you peace and healing with the universe who knows what's in your hearts. So my wish is that we can all find I-thou moments in random encounters, planned meetings, group settings, and we can share our stories so we can be authentically us. And in all our interactions, make spaces for others to be authentically them. And in addition, perhaps we need to make some space or hold the space in solitude or in community to share the truth of our lives in the presence of the divine as well. So I invite you now, as we have done every day so far, to spend some time in prayerful reflection as Nick plays on what today's discussion of making space may have brought up for you. You're invited, if you so wish, to write down something to be included in a prayer. It may be that you want to give thanks for something that has come to mind, or an insight, or name a person or situation that is in your thoughts. As always, there are a lot of us here, so don't feel pressure to write something if it's not in your heart. And we may not be able to use all the contributions, but Michael is typing them all up to share later.
We now enter a time of stillness, and if you still have leaf stickers to contribute, please do feel free to bring them to me during our time of stillness. Let us pray. Spirit of life and love, as we move towards the end of our time together in this place made sacred by our presence, help us hold tenderly in our hearts all that we cherish and lay down the burdens which weigh heavy with us. Divine mystery, help us have the courage to both share deeply and listen deeply, even when this brings up painful, uncomfortable feelings for us. May we be open to new and creative ways to enable, allow, and support connection. Help us deal with the destructive impact that COVID has had on so many lives and relationships. May we all, and may everyone, all, find a space where they feel loved and comforted. And may we all create such a space. We know that there is so much more we can say, so much more that we can do. For all those prayers, written and spoken, may those concerns be at the heart of our actions. May we continue to strive, making space in our lives and in our communities to include those who are so often excluded and on the margins, so that we may all become a blessing to the world. Amen. And now let us sing our final hymn. It's in your green Hymns for Living book, hymn number 45, Come Down, O Love Divine. I offer this closing blessing of words by our dear friend Reverend Winnie Gordon. With open hearts and minds we leave, remembering you are not alone, empowered to transform, to be transformed, and to transform others. May the God of your heart guide and protect you as you go on your way. Go in peace and love. Blessed be. Ashe and Amen.